You're listening to the HNC Let's Talk podcast, hosted by Dexter Brooks. Thanks for tuning in to HNC Let's Talk podcast. We partner with subject matter experts to provide candid conversations on health and lifestyle. Here at HNC Let's Talk podcast, mental, physical, spiritual, financial, and health are all connected. This episode of HNC Let's Talk podcast is sponsored by HealthNet Co. Together, we make insurance simple.
Hello, everyone. This is Dexter Brooks with HNC Let's Talk podcast. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Our guest today is going to be Tavarus Hogan, and we decided to bring him back. Tavarus has actually launched his own podcast, and he has a lot to share with us today.
Mr. Brooks, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's interesting, the whole podcast launching phase. And what we've chose to do is we launched April 7th. We're coming out with a couple of different episodes, and then we're going to have a bigger launch when we have more episodes in the kitty. So we're sort of in a phase where we're soft launching, but then the real thing, it's still kind of yet to come. So it's a bit of a teaser.
Oh, now that's not nice for you. You know, it's a teaser. Come on, man. So your first podcast, what was it about?
First podcast, we were lucky to get an amazing guest, guy by the name of Alex Willis. He calls himself the Minister of Construction. Interestingly enough, I had never met this guy. His name came up, let's say it was in February. 3 weeks later, we were in the studio. We had a lot of similarities. We played sports against each other. Wow. We played on one of the same sports teams right after each other. We kind of had similar paths. It was a pretty interesting and intriguing listen. So for those of you, which is probably a lot, that hadn't gotten an opportunity to listen to it, Alex Willis, the Minister of Construction, episode 1 of the True 7 Life podcast.
And so the podcast name is actually True 7 Life podcast.
True 7 Life. And we interview what I like to call self-employed business heroes. And we talk about the entrepreneurial journey. We talk about challenges, best practices, mindset, all of that great stuff. And Alex Willis, being an athlete, we had a very engaging conversation.
Now, from our last conversation, you did mention that you basically have a full background in podcasting. So let's touch base on that. Let's bring people back to that last conversation we had.
Yeah, so my background is in sales. I transitioned when I was in the corporate space from sales to learning and development, 3-year career in learning and development, because even though I was a sales guy, I was always the person that if there was a new teammate or someone new to the team, I would always take them under my wing and show them the way and show them the route, teach them, coach them, mentor them, etc. So learning and development was a natural progression. When I was in this space, it freed up a little bit more of my time to be more hands-on with the employees and personnel. I developed a relationship with our communications team, and we had this idea that we were going to come up with a podcast to communicate sales information, brand information, different things to our sales organization. I was part of a culture that we had a lot of ideas, and oftentimes everything doesn't get executed. So we had a conversation, and after the first conversation, I wasn't that interested because there just wasn't enough excitement around execution. So about 2 weeks later, I got back on the horn and I was like, listen, I'm all in if we can have this thing up and running in the next 30 days. So the next day we met, we mapped out 12 months worth of content, and within 30 days we were live with our first podcast. So it was pretty interesting.
Wow. So that's pretty awesome. So how long is for your first podcast? You said it was a teaser. How long was it? This was a 30-minute episode of?
Yes. So my first podcast, it was an hour long, and Alex, he's a great guest. He's one of those guys that can carry an audience for 3-4 hours. You know, not that he's a stand-up guy, but he's the type of guy that you can go to a conference and he can host the entire thing.
Wow.
As we all know, an hour can be kind of laborsome. And if we want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, an hour worth of editing of a podcast, that's where the challenge comes in. So right now, I'm debating on whether or not we're going to stick with that hour format or if we're going to cut it back to about 30 minutes. And I'm pretty certain we're going to cut it back for those listeners.
Yeah, that's one thing that most people don't realize, that when you do podcasting, you are responsible for going and doing all that extra legwork, the editing, the artwork, the promotions. That's your responsibility. So it's not just picking up a mic and jumping on a computer and going, hey, I'm going to start a podcast,
And so here's the thing. The company that I worked for, I still podcast for them. And it is that. And that's why I was deceived, because I was just the voice of it, and I would interview people. So it was easy for me. I would come up with engaging questions. I knew the industry. I knew the business. I knew what the sales reps wanted to hear. So I set it up. We had an editor. We had all of that. I thought it was just about getting on the mic and asking questions. I knew there was editing that went into it, but I figured, I could pay somebody $100. They'd edit like 10 or 15 episodes for me.
So how long did it take you to edit your first podcast?
Oh, man. The first podcast. So actually, I want to give a shout out to my guy G Money at the Studio Podcast Suites here in Jacksonville, Florida, because he allowed us to use his studio for the first recording, and he actually edited the podcast. Now, I love Gary. He's my guy, and Gary knows because he's worked with me. I'm particular and meticulous, but that's when I'm not editing. So I would have put a little bit more time in editing it. So my second podcast, when this was the first official podcast that I edited from front to back, and some people say an hour worth of content, you can multiply that by 3 to determine how much your editing time could possibly be. Yep. I easily have 6 hours in this thing.
Man, I tell you, I mean, I enjoy the podcasting piece of it, trust me. And I'm trying to get down to the point where now that to do less editing and try to focus on what the content is. And that's it's getting easier in some cases, but it's getting difficult in some cases. You're a professional. So like bringing you on is really easy because you know how to communicate. You know how to basically say what you're going to say, pause, move forward. Although some people, they will talk for 30 minutes if you don't interrupt. And it's kind of hard when you're trying to, it's a podcast, it's a communication, you don't want to just jump in there, but a lot of times you just have to do it. It's like,
yeah, it's definitely difficult as the host. And one thing I try to share with my guests, and I hadn't so much on my own podcast because it's new, but the company that I podcast for, I let the guests know, because they have a lot of good information and they know their information very well, but we have to consider the listener, and we have to give the listener a break, and we have to change up the voices for the listener to keep them engaged, because at the end of the day, it's about the listener. It's not about the host or the guest. It's about content for the listener.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know I've started trying to do a little bit of more podcasting on the coronavirus. I did recent one I did was basically that. It was basically stating how the virus was affecting people of color more. And a friend of mine sent me this video clip from this lady who was in New York. And she was livid because she had lost a sister. Mm. And she was saying they never tested her. They had her in there for so many days, and she kept asking to test, and they said, no, we're not going to test her. She sent her home. She ended up going back and still didn't test her. They sent her home. She ended up going back. They said it was something else, pneumonia. Then they sent her home and said it wasn't COVID, and she died. And before she died, they tested her. She was positive. Mm. She was livid, man. It's a great video. I threw it in my podcast because it brought that reality to the podcast.
Yeah. COVID-19 is tough for me. There are a lot of people speaking on it. There are a lot of people that have some strong opinions. There are a lot of people that have been affected that should have strong opinions. I can't allow myself to
Yeah.
get into it. So I'll listen to whatever you have to say. I'll nod. I'll be engaged. I'll cheer you on. I'll rah. I'll be in the front row, but I just can't speak on it.
See, okay, but so I want to let my listeners know, okay, so Tavarus is in Florida, guys, so that should answer everything. So,
I'm in Florida, where there are a lot of states that are still understaged. There are a lot of people that are still affected, but our beaches are open.
are open. Yes, I see, and that's the thing. I noticed that the other day. I saw that, and that's been the clip of all today, is how the mayor opened the beaches, and people were not social distancing. There was no mask. This is like, and I think you're supposed to be on the beach only to exercise. Isn't that right? Can I get that a yes or no on that?
So I will say this: the beaches are open from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. I believe it was poor communication. The beaches are not open. They're there for that allotted period of time, but when you use the language, the beaches are open, it sends the wrong message. So I just think it was a poor use of language to say that the beaches are open.
But you got a point there, and you're absolutely right, because it's the way you communicate it. Saying it's open means people think it's open, and they did not just go back and say, okay, yeah, but but they said they said what the mayor said, it's for exercising, get out to ride a bike, walk your dog, and all this stuff right here. But the police was out there. That was good.
And here's the truth of the matter. I am wise enough to know that there is a difference between what is said and what is heard. Somebody can explicitly say XYZ, but you heard ABC. It happens all the time. Anybody that's married, you know what I'm talking about. So you have to be crystal clear and precise in communicating something like this, and you have to over communicate. All they heard was the beaches are open.
Well, that's what I think, that's what everybody's hearing, because I think when Trump went out and tweeted about the states to be liberated and it was okay to protest, every state has had a protest. I think Philly's having their protest today. And people, I noticed this yesterday, it was more people out and about yesterday than any time in the last 4 weeks. And where I live, I can see the highway because I live right at the highway in Colorado. So I'm in one of the major areas where I'm like 10 minutes from the airport and 10 minutes from downtown.
Dexter, you mentioned that. I don't know if the reason I don't speak on it is because I'm in Florida. Actually, I know it's not. If I was in Colorado, if I was in Georgia, if I was in New York, I don't know about New York. If I was in New York, I would try not to speak on it. But I'm the type of individual, I'm naive to a lot of things because I don't allow it to get in my spirit. I don't even allow it to get into my space. There's not a lot of good news going on surrounding COVID-19, so I'm not going to be consumed with it. A lot of my friends hate my approach, but I'm just not going to allow myself to go to a place where it could open up a lot of negativity. Like, I just don't feel like I have a lot of time to be in that space. So that's one of the main reasons that I choose not to talk about it. I feel like I have enough friends that are consumed with it, that if there is something important for me to know, somebody will communicate it to me.
But you're just like everyone else. And this is I'm from the healthcare industry originally. So, and my friends that are still in the healthcare industry, we can sit down and talk about it for hours because it's more scientific than anything for us.
Yeah.
But if you're not from that industry, it's like it's the negativity of it is just too strong, and people just go, nope, go away.
But to a certain degree, I don't know if I will say it's entertaining, but there's a little bit of that entertaining because in science, you're trying to figure something out. So it's engaging for you and your peers for a different reason.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Completely different. So we're going to swing back here because we know Tavarus don't like the COVID-19 word.
It's not just COVID-19. It's any negative, depressing topic.
And we're going to swing back here and talk to my man about his podcast because congratulations, first of all, because I'm excited. I know, but that's your background, but it's a total different animal when it's yours.
Absolutely. I will say this before we leave the COVID-19, and I think I can speak for you when I say this. I do want to thank all of the healthcare workers, first responders, everybody that's doing everything to try to get this thing contained, and everybody that's doing everything to keep us safe. I will say that message every day and as often as I can.
Thank you. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
And I'm glad you came back full circle to this professional thing. I've only been podcasting for a little less than 2 years. So I don't know that I'm professional, but one thing I love about podcasting, I do a lot of podcast coaching, and people feel like there's such a gap between where they are today and actually having a podcast aired. A lot of people, there are some people that they look at podcasting like just a goal of theirs. But for me, I have experience in podcasting, but to a certain degree, for a large amount of time, I felt like an imposter. And until I started learning more about editing and software and different things like that, I suffered from imposter syndrome. I would go to podcast conferences and all of that, but I never really fit in until I said I was going to have my own podcasting, and I got behind the scenes and got in the trenches. Because now if people ask me questions, I can provide answers. I have some conversation that I can give back to them. Just hosting the podcast and sending the raw audio, there's not really much you can say. You can tell people how to ask questions, how to engage an audience, but that's really it. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's like my co-host, Jason Schenkel. He's actually a psychologist. So the text part is not there. He has no tech part whatsoever. I know that he told me the other day that he actually went to a seminar on podcasting, because he needed to know more. People get more intrigued once you jump into it. And so I'm glad he did, because he taught me some things that I didn't even know.
That's awesome.
Then I'm like, well, it's great to learn, because you're not going to know it all. It's like I posted some information on the podcasting groups on Facebook, and you never get the right answer when you post on those groups. That's the sad thing about it. People seem to avoid giving you the correct answer. They steer you every which way. And I'm not even going to tell you what the question was, because we on air, but
That's interesting. We're going to have to check those groups you're in. We definitely need to talk about some of these groups off air, because I'm in 2 groups that I think they're pretty phenomenal. They're pretty big groups. So let's discuss those off air.
Yeah, because I'm like, So I don't think I posted in the group you and I in together. I don't think I posted it to that group. I probably would have got a great answer if I would have posted it.
Hey, we're only as good as our information.
So that's life, man. You got to know where to go to get the right answers every time.
There you
go.
So
what are you planning on doing now that you started your podcast? You launched it first when you said it was a teaser.
Today is a teaser. I guess the episode is a teaser also. I launched the first one. I'm launching the second one. My podcast, they come out on the 7th and 21st. Name of the company is True 7 Life. Initially, I was going to launch one per month because I didn't want to overload or overwhelm myself. But we recorded that first episode, and it was so dynamic. I said, I've got to try to do this more often. Plus, the analytics say if you stay away from your listeners for that long of a period of time, it's easier to make them forget about you. Mm-hmm. So I chose the 7th, obviously, because the company is True 7 Life. And then I chose the 21st strategically also. And what was your question again? I'm babbling. And I don't even, what am I planning on doing with it? It's interesting. 2020, I've been living by many mantras, but one mantra when it comes to business is I will never know my limits until I push them. So I'm pushing my limits this year to understand what I'm capable of. And with the podcast, to be quite honest, I say all that to say, I'm figuring it out. Right now, I have 2 services. I have 2 products. I have 2 podcasts. And if you ask my peer group, they would probably say I have too much.
I was about to say that. Dude, is that plate pretty full there? Don't you think? Because I know you got the two businesses, now the two podcasts. How are you managing?
It's one of those things where I'm just managing, and 2020 is really about finding out what I'm capable of. I enjoy all of it, and I've had some harsh realities that I'm going to have to shave some of it that's not beneficial to the long-term goal. And I'm understanding that. So with the podcast, back to that, what I'm doing with it, I'm filling it out and I'm trying to understand where I'm going to go with it. My desires was to have an entrepreneurial podcast, and I can still have that. But my services is presentation skills coaching and podcast coaching. The podcast doesn't necessarily support that. It would be great from a business standpoint if it did. I'm trying to determine, do I still continue to go this entrepreneurial route and support other entrepreneurs, which I have no problem with, or do I try to pivot my podcast and have it support my services? And right now, it's probably going to be standalone and just have great guests and great interviews. I hadn't had anything that tells me I need to change that.
That's a good point. I mean, but it is your first one. So, I say probably 3 months from now, you may be looking at it a little bit differently.
And that's the thing. It's trial and error. And that's the people that I coach. That's what I encourage them. Because for me, in my experience, individuals believe they have to have it all together and they've got to be buttoned up to launch. There's a guy, Chris Kremistos. He just wrote a book. It's called Start Ugly. Most people that create something great, it started out ugly. We look at pottery. It starts ugly, but the finished product is something beautiful. The bottom line is you have to start. And I believe podcasting, oftentimes as host or whoever the creator is, we overlook the opportunity for growth and development for us. So I encourage people, listen, get some episodes out. It's going to eventually tell you what it's supposed to be. Don't worry about it being X, Y, or Z. Have an idea, but it's going to take a life of its own.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I learned that after my 3rd month. And you're right, because it's things change.
They do.
It's like they say, when you do a business plan, you got to leave it wide open, because you got to always go back in and add something, change something. You fall asleep one night and you have a dream, and all of a sudden that dream says, oh, you need to do this,
Yeah, I mean, you can't get any feedback if you don't have any action or activity out there. So we have to get started so we can get feedback and we can develop things. Sometimes it's a gift and a curse. Some people like to have grandiose business plans and all of that, and it has its purpose and its place. For me, I'm the type, I have to dive in and get it done, or it'll be an analysis by paralysis.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the same way. The business plan starts off in the top of my head. If it comes to the point where somebody said I need to get funding for it, then I put it on paper. But it starts off in the top of my head. It's going to stay there in the top of my head, because as long as I'm thinking about it, that means that's something I really want to do. If I stop thinking about it, then it's not for me to do it.
Yeah. And I'm the type, listen, I went to Vanderbilt University, but I'm not smart enough to be able to develop a business plan and then go and execute it and all of that. I'm on the job training. So I've got my businesses out, and now I'm going back and finishing off and crafting the business plans. And that's going to be how I'm going to grow these businesses. So that's my process. There are other people that have been successful that way. There are many other people that have been successful another way. For me, that's what works for me. So I'm executing my formula.
So how is the True 7 business going anyway? I mean, because we did our first show. We talked about your business.
Yes.
And did you get any sales from the Colorado podcast at all?
I want to thank the HNC listeners. The coupon code has come through a couple times, so I appreciate Colorado. True 7 Life. We're branching out to Colorado. We actually have some growers out in Colorado, so it's great to begin getting business out there. So,
hey man, that's see, and that's the way you do it. That's awesome, man. That is awesome.
Yeah, really appreciate that. I've got to, let me find, what was the code that we use? I got to look that code up because we got to get that code out again for our listeners, our HNC podcast listeners.
That is a good question, and I would have to pull up some old documents to see what that was. I'm sure it's on my Facebook page because I think I posted it there.
Yeah, I remember seeing it, but we will certainly look that up before we end the podcast today.
Because I was like, all right, I know people, it's not about where you are, it's about where you market to.
Absolutely. HNC7, there it is. and I think I saw that's a 20% off code. You
that's
twisted
a 20%
my arm.
Code, man. That's right. That is a 20% off code.
You twisted my arm and you got an extra month. So
awesome.
Be sure to go to true7cbd.com. Use the coupon code HNC7 to get 20% off all of your CBD products.
And this is a good time to get that 20% off because I can say with most of the people being out of work, trying to get the unemployment, all this, that 20% off makes a big difference.
Yeah. I saw it pop up and I just assumed that it was 10%. When I would get
shocked when you saw that big 20 there.
That's fine. Hey, only the best for you.
He saw that 20 like, oh, that was 20%.
I didn't even notice it. I just saw the orders and I saw the coupon code come up. I didn't even pay attention to it. I didn't even realize it was 20% until I just looked back in my notes. But hey.
Awesome. So, I mean, it's like, that's a lot going on. Cause like to do the podcast, to do the business of the site, when do you sleep?
I don't want to say I'll sleep when I die, but I will. But the truth of the matter is I do get good sleep. I get good rest. I try to take care of my whole man, the total body. Just last week, I had to ramp up my activity, to tell you the truth, because there were some things that started slacking. So I try to get to bed by 10 o'clock, and however much I sleep is how much I sleep. If it's 3 a.m. and I can't sleep, I get up, do a little bit of reading in the morning, and start working. Now, if I get up at 3, I probably take a nap around 7 or 8, half hour nap, just so I can be refreshed for the day. But it's go time for me right now. To your point, I've got a lot going on, and I'm counting on me. I'm betting on myself, and I don't understand failure. So there's one option, and it's to make it work. And I had a good talking to myself this past week. We're executing at a high level, and there's nothing but success. Like, there's no other option.
You got that entrepreneurial spirit, because that's exactly what it is. When you find yourself, like you said, your schedule, you get up, you get started, you take that nap. Yes, people hear that. Entrepreneurs need to take that nap. You have to take that nap.
Yeah. And listen, I'll take it at 7. I'll take it at 8. I'll take it at 9, as long as I don't have any calls. But, that's predicated on me getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I don't do that all the time. I do it.
Wait. Did you say 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning?
3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because I'm up at 4 every morning.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I don't consistently get up at 4. You're saying you're up at 4. That seems like you're up at 4 on Monday, on Tuesday, on
Wednesday. Yes. Yeah. I'm at 4. I'm up at 4 every single day.
Yeah.
Every single, I don't know. I'm so driven that way that it's like natural for me to wake up at 4. If I don't get up at 4 o'clock, it's almost like I miss something. And I even had to go back to Facebook and say, because I had to ask them to give me permission to do messaging at certain times, because when you do business across state lines, you got different time zones. Mm-hmm. So the 4 o'clock works great. So I can get things set up for things that is on the East Coast.
Absolutely. Or in Europe. I mean,
they're in Europe. That's right.
So, yeah, I've heard a lot of getting up early for me. It's just a mental thing, and mental health and wellness and all of that is important to me, spiritually, physically, mentally. When all of that is hitting on the right cylinders for me, I can't be stopped, period. It doesn't matter. And I've just had to, like I said, I've had to talk to myself, and I've had to get every single thing back in order. going to bed on time, getting up on time, working out when I'm supposed to work out, reading when I'm supposed to read, doing all of that is going to make sure that these businesses are successful. But when I have a laissez-faire approach to my schedule, then it's going to show up in my businesses. So I'm used to having that discipline. And I feel like if I get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, there aren't many people that are up at that hour. There are some, because there are some superstars out there, but I'm ahead of most of the game at 4 a.m.
So if a person is looking for your podcast, where can they find it?
I'm on Apple. I'm on Spotify. I'm on all of the major hosting networks. True 7 Life. Look up True 7 Life and you'll find us.
So you know what I'm doing right now, right?
You're looking up True 7 Life. Absolutely. Let's go. You're supposed to be. By the time this airs, we will have officially launched. We'll have 3 episodes. We'll have the Minister of Construction. Our second episode is a scrappy mom and CEO that is just crazy courageous. And I'm still working on my third guest. I have someone in mind that I think is going to blow the top off of these first 3 episodes.
Now, I actually love the branding.
I appreciate that.
I mean, the red 7 just stands out so perfectly, you know?
Thank you. Yeah, the idea was to have it almost look like an app and make you want to touch it.
You see that, guys?
Yeah.
That's True 7 Life Tavarus Hogan on Apple Podcasts. And he's, like I tell everybody, you can find your podcast anywhere you stream your favorite podcast.
Absolutely.
Let's pull you up here. You want to get a soundbite on there? Oh,
yeah, pull up.
You did a teaser, didn't you?
Yeah, go ahead and Minister of Construction. That'd be a good one.
Okay, let's jump into that.
Have you ever considered owning your own business? Are you an entrepreneur facing obstacles in your growth trajectory? Are you a successful business owner looking for like-minded individuals to connect with? If you're any of the above, the True 7 Life podcast is for you.
Jump in about halfway.
True 7 Life podcast, a conversation where we showcase self-employed business heroes that have taken a leap of faith, bet on themselves, and are blazing trails in the entrepreneurial space. Thank you for listening in. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest here today. I don't even know how to start out the show. This is my first episode, and I'm honored just to be in the studio with a gentleman by the name of Alex Willis, father, husband, son, highly decorated.
Hey man, I'm just happy to be here. You have no idea the text I got from my wife last night because she had my phone when we talked a little bit there.
Yes,
and I'm excited just to be here with you in the studio and just the energy and the excitement. It's a lot of fun, man. We're gonna have a good time.
Wow, man, that's amazing. I mean, that is really great. The intro is totally on point.
Thank you.
The energy between you and your guests was automatic.
That guy is electric. That's all I know.
I mean, that is really, I applaud you, dude. And that's your first one. And you talking about come out scruffy? No, dude, you didn't even come out scruffy. You know?
I had some cheat codes from the corporate space. I do a decent job hosting. It's just once I get that raw audio, that's where the problems begin.
Man, that is awesome.
I want to shout out GarageBand for all their help and Buzzsprout, who does my hosting. Thank you, guys.
I mean, that is just the perfect sound piece in that intro. The clarity is there. The communication is there. The energy is there. So you know that your listeners are going to stay tuned in.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm excited about it. I love getting into entrepreneurial minds. I'm competitive. I like to understand how people get their edge, what their thought process is. I'm one of those guys, I like to chew up the meat and spit out the bone. So if I can steal something from this guy or this young lady or this person or that person, I'm doing it. Like Dexter, I'm taking notes now, stealing some of your tips. So hope you don't mind.
Hey, that's what it's all about, man. It's about, sharing information and, you can be competitive, but the thing is, everybody's podcast is different. Everybody's podcast is unique. And that's one thing I like about podcasting is that they're different. They're unique. The communication styles are different and they're unique. There's not one that's alike.
Yeah. When I knew that I was going to do a podcast, so I was doing the corporate podcast, just hosting it. And I was fortunate enough to go to a podcast convention. And the convention was so warming and welcoming and just so positive. I knew I wanted to be a part of that community. So I knew it was only a matter of time. So to your point, everybody's different and everybody's just so supportive and everybody wants to see everybody do well.
They do. I mean, because it's just that energy, it's like, okay, we're these podcasters that decide to do this for whoever knows what reason it was, it just happened. And then it's also so rewarding to the point where, especially during these times when people are sheltering in homes and all this stuff right here, you get to connect with people all across the globe.
It's amazing. I mean, literally, I've met people from all across the globe at these conferences, and I don't know what's going to happen with the future of conferences. Hopefully we'll get to a spot where they'll come back, but these conferences are amazing because there's no part of the globe that you can't connect with.
Absolutely. So tell us, what do you have planned for that? I mean, you did mention some items. You had some podcasting coming up. Your next one's going to be on the 20th?
7th and the 21st. So this next one is the 21st. Yeah, we interviewed a scrappy mom and CEO. Another
hold on. A scrappy mom.
Scrappy mom and CEO. I'm big on personality tests and behavior tests and all that, DISC, MBTI, all that good stuff. She did strengths finders, and one of the findings was that she was scrappy, and she took it the wrong way. She didn't understand it. Obviously, her scrappiness. So there's a pretty engaging conversation around that on the podcast.
I can imagine so, because I'm like, okay, scrappy. It's like, okay, you're gonna tell a female you're scrappy? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm sure she has something to say, but I'm sure you ironed it up very well.
I just let the tape run. There's not a lot of editing during that part.
No, there's no edit. I like that. That is definitely awesome. All right, my man Tavarus. So what is it that you want to leave with HNC Let's Talk podcast listeners today?
I'm finding my way. I know we're in some trying times, so I want to talk to the HNC podcasters about my two services. I do presentation skills coaching, and I do podcast coaching. I'm doing free 30-minute evaluations. You can find me on Facebook at True7Life. You can find me on Instagram at True7Life. And with all of my services, I have a price list. I'm forwarding people my price list, but I'm in a position right now where I'm allowing people to pay what they can afford. Until this pandemic is over with, I'm slashing all of my prices for my services, and you can pay what you can afford. That's podcast coaching or presentation skills coaching. Find me at True7Life on Facebook or on Instagram.
Awesome, man. That's really good. I mean, because you're looking out for the people.
Listen, we always have a gift for the HNC listeners.
You're looking out for the people, man. That's what's so important. You're thinking about the little people that are struggling, and that's more important. I tell people that every day, all the time. Don't look at your rewards in the front. They're going to come back to you in the end. Just wait.
Dexter, it would be inconsiderate to everybody that has helped me get here to believe that I got here on my own. And my thing is, I'm 41 years old. I've been on earth over 40 years, and I've never longed for anything, wanted for anything, needed for anything, and never went without. Now, I think we probably talked about this last time. There have been some hard times. There have been some nights I didn't eat, all of that, but never did I feel I was going to be in a long-term situation of need. So for all the blessings that I've gotten and received in the 40 plus years that I've been here, it's time for me to give back. And that's a large reason why I chose to move into this entrepreneurial space, so I can free up my time and free up my mind and think about these creative ways to help people and give back, man, because it's bigger than us, man.
It is. It is. It's much bigger than us. And I hope our listeners understand that.
Yeah. And so for me, it's not even about me slashing prices and all of that. For me, it's about you giving me the platform to do the things that I've been blessed to do. So it's bigger than just that. Like, if I don't have this platform, then I can't serve.
You hear that, people?
If we don't have a platform, we can't serve. HNC has given me the platform.
That is so true. If you don't, somebody will always, and I do that because someone has always been there for me. There's always someone who's always picked me up. And I got a bad past. So, and I'm not going to say bad, but it's struggles.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I think everybody does. Everybody has that struggle, you know, that dip, that up and down. You know, you have to learn how to give back. All right, my man, Tavarus Hogan, I do want to thank you again for joining HNC Let's Talk podcast. And again, the door is always open for you to come over and give us a shout out and tell us what you got going on over in Florida, because, you know, it's nice to be in touch with everybody on every side of the world.
Well, good. I'm lobbying to come back because I want to make the trifecta. I want to bring it full circle. I want that 3 times the charm. So after the launch, and I've got some more good news for you, let's make it happen again.
All right. We will do that. And again, to my listeners, I want to thank you all for listening today. This is HNC Let's Talk podcast signing off. Be well.